You are listening to the new man beyond the macho jerk and the new age wimp. Your host is men's coach Tripp Lanier.
How important is it for you to be in control? Do you ever feel like your life is out of alignment with your values? And what does it take to forgive someone who has hurt you deeply? Today, my wife Alyson Lanier gets curious about the emotionally constipated guy I used to be back in my early 20s. We talk about why I went to therapy, why I hated the idea of personal growth, and how my life looked amazing from the outside, but was a fragmented mess on the inside.
Do you remember that?
Oh, the guy who
Sorry, he was a security guard, and his entire Instagram account was just him yelling.
fart. Who's that guy? I love it. So that's a turn on for you.
No.
What if he has groupies?
Me.
What if he has groupies? He's got ladies that are DMing him, and they're just like,
I'm sure there's a fetish. I'm sure there's a fetish for that.
You're sure because you've looked it up? No,
but I feel like I've worked with enough people. I've talked to enough people. I've seen enough things in the world to be like, all right, there's just somebody out there somewhere, or a few somebodies, or many somebodies out there
that like the farts.
They get a little turned on by the farts.
And you're one of them.
I'm not one of them. Stop saying that.
I just feel like this is where I'm letting you down. That's why you got me a Chipotle gift card for Christmas.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Because you wanted me to.
Yeah. No sex toys in the stocking. We want farts.
They're kind of one in the same.
Bring on the gas.
Bring on the gas. Well,
okay. Welcome to the new man. We're back. There's so many things that we can talk about, but.
So many things.
One of the things that I'm tracking with you, and just generally, one of the reasons that I wanted to do this with you is that you've done this podcast for, I don't know how many years, definitely over 10 or 11 now. How many?
Yeah, I think it started in 2006 or 2007.
Yeah. Point being, long time.
Long time.
Today, as part 1 of 3, I think I want to get into the life and times of Tripp Lanier.
Don't say it like that.
I can say how bad. Well, part of what I'm curious about, and what I want our listeners to, receive and get to know you more on, is know more about your life, and how did you've come so far since I've met you, but you were on a journey even before I met you. And when I met you, you were at a certain place in your seeking and your growth. And you were running a media production company in Florida. I was in Colorado, in Boulder. And you were doing commercials, political stuff for money, and doing stuff for ESPN and documentaries and stuff. And
keep going.
Well, I'm saying I want to give the context, because you don't need to do all that. I just want to know, but you were on a path. When I met you, the man that I knew about you was you were doing Tai Chi. You had started
teaching
a men's
old ladies
group.
Tai Chi.
Teaching old ladies.
I was.
Tai Chi. I didn't know you were teaching old ladies Tai Chi, but I knew you were teaching
it. It was me and the ladies.
Will you share a little bit more about what that chapter of your life
I'll do that.
was?
I'll share this, but the context would be just so the listener can find themselves in that story too. And
okay, humble.
I don't know. It's not humble. It's just uncomfortable.
Okay, humble. They're uncomfortable. So
what would help me is if we put it through the context of the growth path, because there was definitely a before and an after.
Okay. So how did you get into personal growth? How about that?
How did I get into personal growth? That works. That feels better. Right. So especially if we're, this book that's coming out, this book will make you dangerous. Right. So a lot of the concepts in this book, where did they come from? What's stuck? That helps me to give it an arc, from the, if this thing's being published, then where did the light get turned on and why? So I would say that, if we're talking about growth, I was a person in my early 20s who was not interested in growth.
Why?
I was very much trying to just control my world. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I was trying to control my world, in hindsight, was that after my mom's death, when I was 13, I essentially was just like, I don't want to feel anything and I don't want to be provoked by anything. I was doing whatever I could to wrestle this, whatever grief and anger and, just feelings, just trying to keep them all under the lid. And I had no idea at the time how much energy I was spending trying to do that. And so what it meant was that I just didn't have a lot of curiosity about the world. I didn't want to explore the world. I certainly didn't want to explore my inner world. There were things that I wanted to learn. I was interested in the business that I was building, which was a media production company. I started that company, 5 months after I graduated from college. A lot of my energy was going into that, just building a company, but I really was checked out of my own experience.
So what were your relationships like if you were checked out?
Terrible. I was, looking back on it, I've got a lot of regrets about how I treated some of the girls that I was with. I was terrified to be with a woman, that could actually meet me or challenge me and hurt me. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to be hurt again.
Or left.
Yeah. And so, for a long time, women, the girls in my life were, people that I could keep at arm's length or, people that I knew I just wouldn't get close to. So I was playing really small in that department. Although I did end up in one relationship with someone who I really genuinely cared about, and we ended up moving in together, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But what I didn't know is that I was in a minefield emotionally. Mm-hmm. And so even though I could talk about things that had happened, I could talk about the situation with my mother. And then that I was like, well, this isn't so bad. I can talk about it. Mm-hmm. It's not that big a deal. Mm-hmm. But what would happen is somebody that I was remotely close with or whatever might die. I'd go to that funeral and I would just lose it. Mm.
Like way beyond
emotionally,
your connection with the actual person that passed.
Yeah. Like I genuinely care about the person, but my emotional response was over the top. There have been several instances or situations where something would happen and it would be something that would garner some kind of an emotional response, but my response would be way over the top. And I would find myself like having to leave or go hide somewhere because I was just bawling. And I couldn't understand. It was terrifying. I was like, what is going on?
What's happening?
What is going on?
And was that happening also? So like,
that only happened a few times
for true with like grief and loss, but was that also happening in your relationships where they were lousy, but would you find yourself maybe having outbursts of anger or like spikes of anxiety or depression or anything like that you wouldn't necessarily label it as such back then, but was there anything where you noticed that you were having like, would happen and it was like, what was that in a relationship as well?
I don't recall. There was unfortunately a lot of alcohol in my life at that time. I was not an alcoholic per se, but it was just such a common thing. I lived in a college town and
like crazy.
Yeah. And everybody was just drunk all the time. So there was just a lot of dumb things, dumb interactions. I can guarantee if you took alcohol out of the equation that so many things would have cleared up and wouldn't have said a lot of the things that I said. So yeah, so I was having these types of emotional episodes and they were like, whoa, what was that? And it was scary not knowing when that might happen. Mm-hmm. And I remember my dad pulled me aside one time because we were at a funeral together and this was after the funeral. And he asked me, he's like, will you go see a therapist? Mm-hmm. And I knew that was tough for him because my assumption, and I'll have to check this out with him, is he was like, he wouldn't go see a therapist. Mm-hmm. So for him to ask me to go do that was a huge deal. And in this environment where we never talked about what happened to my mother, it just wasn't talked about. It had just been not really necessarily brushed under the rug, but like, let's go forward facing. We're moving on. That was the way that we were going to cope with this. And so he asked me to go and I felt a bit defiant, like, well, there's nothing wrong with me and I'll prove it. I'll go and I'll show you. I'll have the therapist write you a letter and be like, Tripp's perfectly fine. Might have been a little bit of hubris.
That's weird coming from you. So I'm noticing when you said, the first thing that you said was you didn't care at all about personal growth. And what you're sharing has a lot to do, or personal development. And what you're sharing has a lot to do with basically being able to be with yourself, be with your traumas and emotions, be with your adverse experiences, but also like be with the expression of those. And I think there are people that think personal development might have nothing to do with like emotional intelligence or getting to a place where they can be with what's going on inside them, doing their quote personal work. Personal development can look like, oh, I'm going to read this book and then I'm going to like Atomic Habits. I'm going to do personal development because I'm going to read Atomic Habits, which is I love that book, but it's like, that's not about me necessarily working on what's going on inside in my psychology and that whole thing. So I think the question that I want to have for you is that when you thought, I don't want to have anything to do with that, it sounds like you were lumping all that in together. I
had no idea what personal growth was. I didn't have any interest in that. And I didn't have any interest in kind of rooting around in my psyche. That was not something that, if anything, I wanted better strategies for outrunning my discomfort. If I could find things that would help me outrun it, then great. Let's go have more fun or do this or like, but that was the strategy. The more was, how do I get better at going faster and outrunning this train? This thing's it's trying to catch me. And that's my strategy. It's not going to be to turn around and let the train mow me over. That was not an option. It was, I need to get better at outrunning this thing. And I remember when I sat down with the therapist that I worked with the first time, I was completely green to this whole process. And I was like, well, what's the end game here? And she's like, well, ideally you'd forgive your mother. And I was like, good luck.
Yeah.
I was so rooted in that victim mindset. I was so righteous and I'd been wronged. And there was such a gripping identity of like,
that was all true.
Why would I ever give that up? Like, it was just, I get to be pissed off and I don't want to make peace with this person. I don't want to have that.
That's not even unforgivable.
Yeah. It was like, well, that's not even an outcome I want. I don't get that would be peaceful. So, and it was also just how disconnected I was to, she was like, well, how often do you think about this? And I was like, well, I don't know, a few times an hour. And she's like, it happened 10, 12 years ago and you're still thinking about it a few times. And I was like, oh, that's not normal. Right. I didn't have any standard for that. Like how, like it was just normal. Yeah. It was just normal. So, so I began that process and that process was largely intellectual. I felt like I got it like, oh, this is what happened and this is what happened to my emotional, but I wasn't connected to any kind of emotional state, like, or any kind of emotional aspect of it. And she would poke and prod and try to give me some things, but I really just wasn't, I was just so bogged down and armored. And I don't really think I could have done anything. I don't feel like I was resisting it. It just wasn't going to happen. And I was living with the girlfriend I had at the time. And I walked into the therapist office and I was like, I think it's time we just wrap up our work together. And she's like, okay. And I said, and by the way, I said, my girlfriend, she's moving out. She's going to move to New York. She's going to go away for 6 months. And I remember my therapist's eyes just lit up like, okay, good luck. We'll see how that goes. Of course, my girlfriend moved out. She didn't move out for 6 months. She was gone. Our relationship was over and the whole thing went tits up. And that's when, I grieved the relationship and losing the relationship with my girlfriend. And that was heartbreaking and that sucked and that was painful. But then there was the iceberg, like what was underneath the water was all of that grief. Here was the abandonment stuff. And I couldn't eat. I couldn't even go to the grocery. I'd be walking along the grocery aisle and just break down, like whatever stupid Muzak song would just hit me. And I'd be like, oh God, and I'd just lose it. And it was terrifying. It was terrifying to not know at any moment when I was going to break down and lose it.
And the losing it really had to do with your girlfriend. You were still found yourself focusing on your girlfriend and the loss of your girlfriend. It wasn't like the original loss was coming and bubbling up.
I wasn't aware of it that way. It took, after a while, it was like, what is going on here? Because this doesn't fit.
Yeah. And I just feel like it's so important to just a little teachable moment here in all of my work with people around grief and loss. I have a theory because I've seen it pretty consistently, which is that you have one big loss and it's like you manage that loss or you handle it in whatever coping skills you feel like you have, which for you was like, I'm not going to handle it other than get a good firm grip and push down on it. But it's usually the second loss. So it's like someone loses a parent and then they lose their cat or their dog or they have a breakup with, or a one night stand. But then the one night stand is like, they're the ones that get left and get ghosted. And then suddenly this massive grief shows up. Yeah. So I just want to speak to that too, because you're naming that, like it was focused on the girlfriend, but then there was this thing around like, wait a minute, this might even be more than her.
Yeah. It was a few weeks after I was really in it and I was still in it. And I had, I'd been broken up, I'd had breakups and stuff before. I was just like, man, this is really deep. And I mean, I couldn't eat. I'd lost 30 pounds. I couldn't even watch television. I didn't want to listen to music.
Were you able to work? Because you had started a company.
I had my own company. I would go in and just
making big mistakes.
I was just doing the bare minimum. I'd come in at night so nobody had to see me. I would just do whatever little bit I had. Glenn, who, I worked with at the time, he knew what was going on. He did a lot to shield me and protect me. And, so it was great to have his friendship and his alliance there and to know that, I wasn't completely misunderstood, but I just really felt isolated and alone. And I was still seeing that therapist through that time, but I was so blown out in orbit. Compared to where I had been, it was such a, what the heck is going on? Right.
So you were maybe going into that initial therapy sessions like, I don't need to be here. Well, am I wasting my time? To going in because you just need a place to contain this
and
stuff?
Also just what the hell is going on? What is going on? Why make this stop? I was in, so it wasn't even, I don't know if it was so much as curiosity, just like, what do I got to do to make this stop? I'm out of control. It was all about control. I want to be in emotional control. I want to feel like I can go do things. So I lost this sense of control and it was like, what do I have to do to get back in control? Right. And I was not surrendering to this process. I was fighting it tooth and nail. And,
even at that point of where you couldn't eat and you couldn't.
Yeah. Eventually it was just like, whatever. I was going to lay on the couch here and cry some more. It's just like, whatever. I'm so tired of fighting it and trying to rationalize this and talk myself out of feeling this way. I just remember just being like, whatever. And I need to cry. If I need to cry, I'll just freaking cry. Just be done. Yeah. And it would come through waves and that kind of thing. You asked how old I was. I guess I was 24, 25 maybe. Okay. And anyway, I was, my mother taking her own life, and I was laying there on the couch one night, and I was just like, "What do I have to do? How do I make this stop?" I was just tired of being in that place, and I had this thought just came in real close to clear. It was like, "Well, you could kill yourself," and I was so clear that I didn't want to kill myself, but I was like, "Well, that would work." That seems
would take away this suffering.
That seems like it would stop this. It'd be a long-term solution to a short-term scenario.
It feels all encompassing and forever and ever and overwhelming. And
exactly.
Intolerable.
It was like, what do I got to do? But I remember it was a lightning bolt that hit me in that moment. It was like, oh, this was it. And that when you say, oh, this was it, what do you mean? This was what? This was what I'm guessing was a flavor of what she might have been experiencing. My mom. Yeah. I don't know. But to even be in a place to consider that kind of thing it just opened a window where I could look in and be like, oh, this is it. Yeah. When this seems like a good idea, when this seems like a viable solution, when it's even on the table, you know, this is what it looks and smells like. And, and I remember, you know, if we go back where a few minutes ago, we're just unimaginable.
Yeah.
Immediately it was like, I get it. I totally get it.
You get how someone,
I get why somebody would do that.
And you, yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. You get how it seems like a good idea at the time.
Seems like a good idea at the time. Totally get it. Not a great choice.
Sure.
Wasn't in my righteousness then. It was just like, I get it. I totally get it. And I felt that forgiveness coming. I didn't have to effort anything. There was nothing that had to be done. Just immediately it lifted. I didn't even realize I've been carrying this 800-pound concrete block of anger and resentment, and it just lifted. Yeah. And it was like, I got it. I totally get it now. Yeah. And I was very clear in that moment though, that I wanted to live, even though this sucked. I want to live. I just don't want to live like this. And,
can I pause? I'm just feeling so interested and drawn to breaking something down right now. What you're talking about, you ran. You had no interest in personal growth. You ran from your emotional.
And I was a macho dick about it.
Yeah. Misogynistic with women and, you know, like mad about lots of things.
Pissed at women, didn't trust them, didn't trust a lot of people or a lot of things. Just everyone was going to let me down. Right. That was the victim story. Yeah.
And I just want to name, like, from my perspective, it's like, yes, that behavior sucks to be around. And, you know, when I have heard your story, and I've heard it more than once, but when I hear it, even still, when I hear you say that, like, oh, my relationship sucked and I was a dick in a lot of ways and I was mad and, you know, all the things that you say, I feel my compassion for you. Like, I feel like, oh my God, you were so hurt. You were hurting so bad. And then I also hear this place when you talk about that sort of like lowest point where you were basically consumed by your emotions and you had fought so hard against that moment and all those moments, but you got to a place where you surrendered just because it was like, what fucking ever, like I can't do anything else. So I might as well just lay here and cry.
Yeah. Let the train hit me.
Yeah. But even though it was like, oh my God, let the train hit me, there was an element of like, I give up. I'm going to just be with what's here. Not from a place of competence necessarily, or like some Buddhist, like, I can handle everything, but it was just, there's nothing more to do, but just be with what's here.
Right.
And the thing that strikes me is that your ability to just simply be with what's there. Yes, of course it's scary. And yes, it's overwhelming. And of course it's still uncomfortable. And then what happened after that was you were able somehow, and you never said this word, but you were able to find compassion. Suddenly you weren't the only one on the planet that's ever had this experience. And you were able to find a place inside that deep pit, glass cage of emotion where you realize, like, oh my God, this is just heaviness. And other people have this too. My mom had this. Of course, this is all consuming. And oh, I get that she's consumed too. The reason that I just want to name that is that there's a lot in our media and personal growth and development that has to do with finding compassion, that has to do with being with your emotions or expressing your emotions, or we talk a lot, but there's just a real organic, unbeknownst to you, thing that was happening with your ability to just actually kind of get swallowed up by it and then be with that. So a little digression, but it felt important to name because that's in you today still. You still have that ability to be with what's here and have compassion that might not be the only thing going on. That might not be the only choice in the room. So coming back to that moment for you, when you had that lightning bolt moment of, oh my God, I can understand, I can see now. I could see how she might have made that choice. I can see how she might have wanted to make that choice. How did you get up off the couch? What had you not be like, yeah, I actually am just going to get all consumed and lost in my emotions here?
Well, I never felt like it was wallowing. I think there's a difference between having emotions and wallowing in them. Mm-hmm. And I was really clear I didn't want to wallow, but I could feel the difference between letting whatever needed to pass, just pass. And I learned then one of the things that stuck with me and it helped me. It was just like, all right, if this was an electrical current, then I'm merely the conduit and it just needs to pass through me. The more that I try to resist it, I'm just burn myself out.
That's great.
I just freak out. It just
creates. Analogy.
So at that point in my life, I was just like, all right, whatever. I got to feel this. Then let's feel it, and it would be done. Mm-hmm. It would be over in a few minutes. Sure. I'd have an experience, and then a few minutes later, like,
this is different now.
I feel cleaner now, and then it might be another wave comes later on, whenever it would.
And so you were able to track that even then. You were able to notice that because it was such a distinct experience.
Well, I felt peace. I wasn't feeling peace trying to outrun it. Mm-hmm. That's where the anxiety and the tension and the shit was coming from.
And the wallowing, essentially, the victimhood you were saying around like, there's no forgiveness here.
Right. So it was like, okay, well, if I got to feel this, I would just feel it. And I let go of it needing to be different. But what I learned was like, it just passed. It was like a rainstorm and it would just pass. And then I felt peace. The peace I was deeply wanting was on the other side of that thing that I was avoiding. Mm-hmm. So it was like, okay, well, whatever. If that's how I get to experience peace, then so be it. I'm tired of trying to hold it all together. And I'd realized like how much work. I mean, when I talk about trying to hold it together, it was like managing every conversation I was in so that they didn't ask about my parents. They didn't ask about my upbringing. They didn't ask. Wow. It was just, how do I stay 3 steps ahead so that we don't go down this road? Wow. How do I say so they don't ask me about this? Like it was always, it was just this, okay, got to make sure we don't talk about this. Got to make sure we don't go down that road. Got to make sure, it was just all this, how do I defensive, just constantly protecting and defending. And that it was freaking exhausting. Yeah. And so now it was just easy. It was like, whatever. Hey, whatever. Let's talk about it. And that felt strong.
Did you know, again, I know hindsight's so clear and you have the words for it now, but back then, the thing that I'm holding on to here is when you were like, my relief was on the other side of my discomfort.
I would say it's peace. It was a genuine sense of peace.
And you were able to identify it back then as such.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. When it feels like shit, anything that feels better than feeling like shit is like, okay, more of that, right?
Relief.
But relief wasn't more relief. I associate more like, cool. I don't have to deal with this right now.
That's managing the conversation.
Right. Okay, good. We avoided the discomfort, but there was still that anxiety.
That's a good distinction between relief and peace.
The relief would be like, I dodged that bullet.
Right.
Peace was, hey, we can go there and it'll be fine. Mm-hmm. That's the difference. And that's what I talk about, when I'm working with people is let's create a real discerning ability to tell the difference between peace and relief. Because most of us are just settling for relief. How do I medicate myself so I don't have to feel that discomfort? How do I distract myself so I don't have to feel that discomfort? Or control or all of these other things. There's a lot different than, hey, if I'm willing to go through this, that's usually where the peace is when I'm not trying to run away from it or avoid it anymore. And I can't hold my hand up and say I do this all the time, but at least I know it. I know it in there that if I really want peace, then we're going to steer into this thing and just deal with it.
You do practice that way. And so that's an amazing kind of aha moment or moments for you on the other side of it. So how did you begin to tack towards personal growth?
After that, I got curious. I was in this place of what the hell?
Where do I get more peace?
Did I just go through? Well,
okay.
I was reborn. I mean, I was just like, holy crap. I was experiencing the world so much differently. I was suddenly curious about things because I wasn't afraid of things. So it was, okay, well, I want to learn about spirituality. What is this weird stuff called Zen or Taoism or whatever? Like, what is this and what is that? I want to learn. And I wasn't a reader before. And man, I just started tearing through books and wanting to figure out what the hell just happened. And I was starting to get a real sense of the machine, if for lack of a better term, my body and my emotions. I was like, what is this? There's this whole thing that's going on, and I can feel it now, and I'm aware of it. I'm aware of me now. I'm not trying to outrun it. So, okay, who's figured this out?
Do you remember the first book that you picked up that really stuck with you?
I don't know if I remember the first. I mean, the first, there were a lot of books that I went through, but I would say that the book that really knocked my socks off and was just like, thank freaking God, was Ken Wilber's Marriage of Sense and Soul. Mm-hmm. And which is Ken's work, right? Ken's work in the world has been to integrate. That's his thing. Like, here's the big picture. Here's how all of these synthesizer. Here's how all the pieces fit together. And I was like, thank you. It actually gives you a map. And like, here's where psychology comes in. Here's where ecology comes in. Here's where this is blah, blah, blah. Here's where spirituality fits in. He was like, thank you so much. I went from this splintered, walled off existence. You can only talk about that over here. There's no relationship between all of these things. They're all siloed, to everything is interconnected, and here's how. Not just some spiritual new age bullshit. Like it's all one, man. It was like, no, here's how it works together. Here's what the sciences are saying. And I was voracious at that point. Ken's work had really opened up something. And of course, like discovering Ken's like discovering Led Zeppelin. You're like, well, then who are these blues guys and who are these folk guys? And you just because he'll introduce you to all the different sciences and philosophers from there on, and so that's what I recall from that period. And boy, I was off, 100,000 miles an hour after that point.
Mm-hmm. So at what point, 100,000 miles an hour at that point? Now this is a important place to actually slow down, even though you were going really fast. A lot of people have these moments, and they're voracious to continue on that path, awakening, peace, freedom, whatever you want to call it. But their life that they've built, everything around them.
I was still in the closet.
Oh, you were?
Oh, big time. Big time.
So you didn't talk to anyone about this?
Not really.
Glenn? What about Glenn?
Glenn and I talked about this.
Was he into meditating back then?
He wasn't into meditating back then, but we could talk about, we would have great conversations about things, mainly kind of more 30,000 foot view of things. But we could talk about, but still, I was in my mid 20s. I was a musician. I was starting my band again. I was still,
so really your songs, split. Though. Did you put it in your lyrics?
Yeah, some of that was in there. But I still was like gonna go out and party. And
so there's still a split. I mean, still like what you said about it being in the closet. Yeah.
Which was tough because I didn't feel that sense of alignment. Mm-hmm. I was in the closet essentially about my, growing curiosity about personal growth, spirituality, all of this stuff, and really didn't have anybody to communicate about it with. And the people that I was around, they were kind of, they were people that I loved, but that wasn't what we would talk about.
And what were some of the, if you can remember, what were some of the stories you would tell yourself about those people that had you stay in the closet about it? Like, oh, I can't possibly talk to them.
It comes out they're just going to think I'm weird.
They'll think I'm weird.
They're just not going to get it. This is stuff that's really important to me. Uh-huh. I don't know anybody else that's gone through something like this, so nobody's going to get it. Just keep your mouth shut. That thing, that whole story.
Yeah. Managing
and so I was out of alignment with my work in the world. My work in the world was, you mentioned the political stuff. Mm. I don't know how I ended up getting political clients, but that's how political clients were finding me. And essentially, I was making really good money, making these crap ads that basically all they did was misinform and scare the shit out of people.
Shade,
and it was like, wow, this is terrible. This is not what I want to do. This isn't what I want to do in my heart, but the money's good. Don't give up the money. Don't do anything to screw that up. Friendships just weren't, at least I wasn't willing to really invite folks into that. I was going and teaching Tai Chi to old people several nights a week. And then I was partying my ass off in a rock band on the weekend. It was just this weird split. I was trying to maintain all of these different worlds, and I was getting back into living a fragmented life. I eventually got back into another long-term relationship, and with that person really wasn't aligned with these values and that kind of stuff. So,
but they were aligned with the other life.
The fun life.
Look of,
I don't know if she wasn't crazy about she was threatened by me being in a band, understandably, going away every weekend and being in front of girls and stuff. Yeah.
The other thing that I want to point to here is that, like you were saying, that you were making really good money. You had bought a house by then, right?
Correct.
You had bought your own car by then.
I was doing well.
You were
for a guy in his mid-20s who had created his own,
made your own company. Yeah, exactly. Like
was working
fresh out of art school, you were rocking in the business world, and only
working a few hours a week.
Right.
And
you were the original 4-hour work week guy, like bringing in the income that you want for only lifestyle. Working, going in at 10 and leaving at 2, which I know you did
after a 2-hour lunch.
Right. So, but the point being is, I think the reason that I'm bringing all that up is because that's I don't know how to talk about it in an articulate way right now, but there's a thing that is so seductive. Like we talked a little bit in our past conversations here about success and getting kind of sucked into what success is. And I don't know that you were ever really dead set on success like the way you described it in our other conversations for other people. But I know that being in that, like having this split means that, to me, it infers that there is some sort of, veneer that you want to keep that has to do with that world, so to speak. You weren't going to go hide in a cave for 17 years.
No, well, there was definitely, I had grown a lot and I had created this life and I was feeling the squeeze, right? So even though it was amazing, and this was the split, this was the real rub, was that I had created a life that was incredibly comfortable. I had created a life that also made me look good. I had an identity like, oh, you've done really well for yourself at a young age. And people are like, wow, I got my ass kissed. Right.
Yeah.
So if you start to take away those things like, oh shit, I don't want to lose that. I don't even want to risk that, but I wasn't feeling aligned there. Right. There was a thing like, is this it?
Although there were comforts that were coming with it, with not working a ton, with traveling.
So I felt crazy to think, why would I want to change? Mm-hmm. What a spoiled brat. Mm-hmm. Why can't I just be happy here?
I'll just keep reading books.
I'll just keep reading books and be in my own little world. And maybe I'll marry this girl, I guess. Like, I don't know. Like there was just this thing. Maybe this is good enough. Like, why can't I just be grateful for what I have? And, but deep down there was this sense of, come on, is this it? You got into your late 20s and this was it. This, you just like plateaued,
which is an interesting voice to even entertain, like even be able to say you heard, given where you've come from. Like you were in basically the way I calculated, 13 years of hard suffering and pain. And then
I wasn't aware of it.
And then Dark Knight, level of like major.
Well, it was a different type of discomfort. It was just like, is this it? Like I'm feeling boxed in. Mm-hmm. And I was curious and willing to try things. And I was actually exploring the world more. I was starting to create some community that I'd actually gotten connected with in the Ken Wilber world through Stuart Davis. He and I became friends. Mm-hmm. And I was just, the world was opening up. Mm-hmm. And there was another possibility. So it went from being less of a, I wonder what else is out there, to there's another world out there. Mm-hmm. And you're being kind of a chicken shit. Mm-hmm. And so as much as I like to thump my chest and be like, I'm all about these values and living this way in the world, I was full of shit. I was doing work that was outside of my values. I was in a relationship that wasn't aligned with what I wanted. And I was also socially, not surrounding myself with the people that really aligned with me, even though I love them. There's no complaint there. It wasn't the next phase of my life. And I was resisting that next phase, and I was playing the victim again. Like wanting to complain. I was laying it on, that my clients suck and this town sucks and my girlfriend is this and that. Just wanting to make everything else wrong. And I became very critical and like bitchy about stuff instead of turning around and say, well, if I don't like it, then what am I going to do about it? It's up to me. It's not the town that I'm living in's fault. It's not my company's fault. It's not this woman's fault. It's me.
Yeah.
How am I going to respond? If I don't like this, then what am I going to do about it? We'll pause the story here. Be sure to subscribe so that you can listen to the next installment whenever it's available. If these interviews are helping you, please leave a positive review on whatever podcast app you use so that others can discover the show more easily.